So you're probably all wondering what I was doing at my joiner and what that has to do with making homemade black powder. Well, it actually has to do with the charring process, and I'm of the belief that doing what I just did, the charring process seems to speed up and it appears to be a little more thorough. Let me just show you something here real quick. So recently, I made some black powder out of Osage orange, and I took the Osage orange, broke it up into little pieces, and then I threw all of that loosely into the char can and started charring it. And what I discovered, and it's not so much of a discovery, is that how can I make this process go quicker? So here's a piece of that Osage orange left over. Okay, and this was after my second or third charring the can, because I'll char it for a little while, take it out, break up what I can, crush what I can, pulverize what I can, and then put the rest of it back in the can and do some more charring. So, I ended up with a piece like this, got a small piece like this, got even a smaller piece like this, and so forth. So my question is for me personally, if I'm having to return wood like this back to the can to continue charring it, well, while something like this is being charred with the smaller pieces in conjunction with, and even smaller pieces, are my smaller pieces perhaps over charring? Because at least for me, I like to get my char to just as it goes from, like the real dark brown to black, because that seems to work best and seems to burn real clean. So when I got the sycamore from my friend William, I cut it up into small pieces on my table saw, and with the, taking my tomahawk and splitting it up and putting it in the cannon, and it's like, God, this is taking so much longer. And then I recalled some time back when I bought the cedar pet bedding. We already know that comes already, in flakes and already very, very thin. And I recalled at that time that char was charring a lot quicker, and it seemed to be a little bit more thoroughly charred through. So, while you're waiting for a larger piece to char through, are your smaller pieces cooking, or are they overcooking? So what I did is I took some of that sycamore and I run it through my jointer, and I get the larger flakes, and I'll show you what most of that looks like right now close up. So you can see it's pretty thin. This, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I do it, chars a whole lot quicker, and it chars more thoroughly and more evenly, because I don't have to sit and wait for this to char completely through, while this might be, I don't know, overcooking. So if you have an opportunity to get to a jointer, you might want to try that. Now, right now, my jointer is set to the deepest cut that it can possibly cut, and this is what I end up with, just little shavings like this. And once they're charred, they pulverize so much more easier. So just something that I like to pass on, and if you have an opportunity to give it a try, and then tell me what you think. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. Thank you for clicking on this video and joining me in on what has been my journey into what is now going to be my top 3 picks for homemade gunpowder, black powder. And a lot of what I'm going to discuss here has already been discussed in previous videos, so I'm going to kind of like maybe recap a few things as quick as I can be, but you might want to pour yourself a drink or something because it might take a little while. You know me, I just can't read off of a script even though I've got one in front of me, so I'm going to be, looking at some notes quite often. If it looks a little choppy from here to there, it's because I kind of misread things. I don't have the best handwriting in the world. But what I want to do in getting started here is to put into this context something regarding chronographs. Now, you've heard me state on this channel, like Paul Harrell, not all chronographs agree. Temperature and elevation can give you different readings. But I want to read from my owner's manual, the chronograph that I have, okay? And it's just a couple of paragraphs, so please bear with me. As mentioned above, the Pro Chrono LTD is a light sensing device. In the course of use, it must cope with a multitude of different lighting conditions. Sunny, clear skies, overcast days, low light situations, reflections, different colors and shapes of projectiles, etc. Although the Pro Chrono LTD works flawlessly over a very wide range of conditions, there are times when the environment can affect chronograph performance. Okay. So I want to go on to reflections. On sunny days, reflective projectiles may cause glints, which can induce velocity errors. This phenomenon is minimized by using the diffuser hoods. However, depending on the position of the sun, now that's something that I've never considered. Further setup adjustments may be necessary. If false readings occur with the diffuser hoods in place, you can correct the problem with one or more of the following steps. Change the position of the chronograph relative to the angle of the sun. And I'm going to just hold off right there because, obviously you can move the chronograph, to a different spot. Change the shade conditions or the sun conditions. I like, and as I've mentioned before, moving my chronograph into the shade when I'm loading my rifle up, just simply to help cool the electronics down, because temperature can also affect your readings, and that's why, I get different readings, and why a lot of you might get different readings from time to time also. But I do want to talk about, the entire greater context of, making homemade black powder. And the first thing I want to talk about is pucking dyes. Now, when I first started, this is what I used, an aluminum sleeve, and I turned a block of wood just so that it fits on the inside. And at that time, I was using cabinet clamps to apply pressure. And at that time, getting a lot of comments from people saying, well, you can get better gunpowder using a 1-inch pucking die and going to a bottle jack and all this other stuff. And in time I did make those changes, but it wasn't because I was really wanting to produce better gunpowder. Just things happened that forced my hand in that direction, and I'm going to explain that. So listening to what a lot of people were saying, I then went to this little brass sleeve, and I used an engine valve, and I put a block of wood, turned a block of wood to fit it and drilled it so that it just fit. For a little bit I was still using this, but then I watched a video from the fellow Hoffman Reproductions where he was doing it in his bench vise, compressing it within the jaws of the bench vise. Just a moment. And I thought, well, I could probably get a lot more pressure out of my bench vise than this. So I went to making black powder, and I got quite a bit made using that bench vise, but then one day, making some pucks, the back of the vise flew off its stand and destroyed the vise. So I had to go to Plan 13B, which was a 12-ton bottle jack. But in all of that, and this is going to pertain to the guessing games that I started doing on this channel, and I quit after the third round because very few people showed any interest in this, in those guessing games, and I think it's just because, well, a patience thing. So I'm going to share with you once again what I learned as it pertains to pucking dies, okay? Now, in game number one, both gunpowders were my juniper, 80 grains by weight, and with the 2-inch pucking die, the 5-shot average was 1626.8. Then I had a 5-shot average with a 1-inch pucking die of 1652, a difference of 25 feet. So I gained a little bit, yes, but my question now becomes this. Which one of those makes you more dead? See, which one of those makes you more dead? Because you're only talking 25 feet per second more. And over a course of 100 yards, 200 yards, is there going to be any deer that's going to get out of the way over that 25 feet per second more? Not really. So then I wanted to experiment with different waters because people were telling me, based on what others were saying, use distilled water only because it's the best of the best. So I decided to do a test in round 3 with groundwater, and one of them was my daughter's city water because they live in Rio Rancho. Then I used distilled water, and then my groundwater. Okay. Now when I did test number 1 with the pucking dies, that was all done with my groundwater, okay? It wasn't until after I started doing this test that I decided I'm going to go to distilled water because I could see a difference in it, even in myself. But was it really that much of a difference? Did it really beg a complete change in using water? Well, with 80 grains by weight again, and all of these were done with the 2-inch pucking die, mind you, okay? So with a 5-shot average, with the gunpowder I made with city water, I get 1662, okay? With the distilled water, 5-shot average, I got 1651. That's only 11 feet difference. Which one makes you more dead? But this is why I changed and now only used, well, I now use 50-50 distilled water and acetone, okay? But when I did that same test, 2-inch pucking die, juniper was the source of the charcoal. My groundwater, I only produced a 5-shot average of 1626. So from 1626 to 1662, that's quite a bit of difference. Enough for me to stop making gunpowder with my groundwater, okay? So there is a little bit of difference there. And I haven't really done any comparative tests with, just pure water or distilled water. Between that and doing what I do now, 50% acetone and 50% water. And I'm not going to do that because I'm of the mind right now using, the distilled water and acetone, in my opinion, seems to make a much tighter puck, and it seems to burn cleaner also. And that also has to do with, you know, people asking me to make gunpowder using the CIA method. And if you use the CIA method, you'll know that you have to use freezing acetone to cool and make everything kind of like jam together better. So I just decided to do a video thinking for myself and just using acetone by itself versus acetone water, and I use the 50-50 acetone water because I think I'm getting a little bit better pucking, and I'm attributing that to the water, not so much the acetone. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about specific gravities of your wood choices. Now, I've received not so much criticism, but people questioning why I show you in those clear jars the value of the specific gravity. And I think if you watch enough of these videos, you can see that when it comes to the specific gravity, say, of willow, you've got much more charcoal to contend with. So you're really asking your KNO3 at 75 grams to consume that much charcoal. And is that why your gunpowder is burning dirty? Okay. Whereas when you get something that's about mid-range and you've got more volume-wise of KNO3, so you're asking actually more volume-wise, I should say, you're asking your KNO3 to consume less charcoal. And in my opinion, that's why specific gravity becomes an important factor in all of this. Okay, and that's why I continue to show that, so that I can see, like, if I'm going to continue to make gunpowder out of willow, which I'm not going to do, there's really no point of going 7713, because just keep your charcoal where it is at the 15 or whatever, and just add more KNO3, because you need that oxygen to consume a larger amount of charcoal as it pertains to a charcoal with a very light specific gravity. Okay, and that's why I kind of still do that, because when I get a gunpowder that I'm not really, or I should say a wood that I'm really not sure of what the specific gravity is, like when I had the cherry, the first time I tested my cherry, charred it up, put it in a glass jar, and I put that against my juniper, and it's like, yeah, that's about 0.48 or 0.50 is what it was. I was led to believe through my boy's Bible. But then I did it a second time, and now it's more closer to the maple. Why the difference? Well, you have to understand that when it comes to woods, even in the same species, there's different specific gravities. I'll refer to buckthorn alder. Buckthorn alder has a specific gravity of 0.50. The speckled alder that I'm using now has a specific gravity of 0.44, and the white and red alders have a specific gravity of 0.39. So even within alder, your specific gravities are going to change, and you need to keep that in mind, because if you're using red or white alder, which is close to willow, and you think it's burning dirty, well, then you need to add more oxygen so that it can work at consuming all that charcoal efficiently. It's no different than tuning a carburetor on a car. And you can look at the spark plugs to see what your carburetor is doing as it pertains to your engine running efficiently. Is it running rich? Is it running lean? That's how you can judge that. So, with that in mind, that's why I focus a lot on specific gravity, especially like when I got the sycamore. Okay, it's supposed to be 0.49, so I put it in the clear jar, and yeah, it's about 0.49. And the cherry ended up being a little less, because what I didn't tell everybody is I went ahead and finished cutting up and charring all of my cherry. So it's obvious to me that within all that cherry that I had collected over the years, I had different varieties with different specific gravities. So now that all of my cherry is blended, and I did that last test, I'm pretty confident that my cherry is at about 0.63. Right in there with maple. And it burns clean, as I showed. So when I did my testing with the cherry, I can't give you any good numbers that first go around out of my flintlock, even though I had 80 grains by weight, and everything that I've been testing, I'm trying to stay right with the 80 grains by weight, not volume. My 5-shot average range from 2083 to 1658. Well, was that the angle of the sun? Or was it the quick rising of the temperature on that summer day? But I can give you what I got out of my Great Plains, 80 grains by weight, 5-shot average. I got 1586 with a spread of 33. Out of that 10-inch shorter barrel, I would say that that's pretty doggone good, especially when you realize the spread was only 33. But make of that what you will, okay? Now, over the years, there's been comments made underneath my channel regarding my powder's dirty. That's why my wet patches are coming out dirty. So I want to talk about the two common things that I saw regarding clean or dirty powder and what they related to. The first thing was the milling jar, that rubber milling jar. Well, see, if you take your gunpowder and look at it underneath the microscope, you're going to see that there's rubber dust. That's why your gunpowder's dirty. Okay, fine. But is it really enough to make you want to change what you're doing? Well, I went to this out of necessity because the rubber lid on my jar started tearing away. But another thing that people were also saying is that my lead media is leaving behind lead dust. That's why your gunpowder's dirty. Let's set aside for a fact that you're using a charcoal. Charcoal, by its very nature, is black and dirty, isn't it? Even if it burns as clean as you think it's burning, it's still leaving a charcoal dark residue behind. And in my mind, right now as it stands, that's irrelevant. Okay, now, regarding my media, and I've mentioned it before, my lead balls are 60-40. For every 60 pounds of lead, there's 40 pounds of tin. And in fact, I have recently discovered that it's even too hard and too dense to shoot out of my 44 Magnum. Okay, but I just want to show you that these are the same lead round balls that I've been using since day one. 0.530. Now, do you know how many hours I've got in milling time with these lead balls? You would think by now they'd be the size of whoops, the size of my .36 caliber. My lead balls have not changed in size. So for me, I'm quite confident that I'm not leaving any lead dust behind in my gunpowders. And at this point, for those that might care, I'm not leaving any little rubber dust left behind either. And I did that in the previous video also. Okay? Now, you would think, as it comes to gunpowder cleanliness, that GoEx would have already got all of this figured out, right? They're using clean containers. They're using the media that doesn't throw any dust into their gunpowders whatsoever. So when I did a test with this, whether it's clean or dirty, I did one shot with GoEx, 70 grains by weight, and I got a velocity of 1572. Now remember, GoEx, cleanest of the cleanest. They got a controlled environment just like Swiss does, of making their gunpowder. But yet, when I shot 70 grains of my juniper made from the rubber container using this lead media, I got 1588. Yeah, it's not much. It's really not much. In fact, the GoX would make you just as dead. But if my using that rubber container and my lead is supposed to get me worse gunpowder than, say, even a GoX, then why is my velocity higher? And I've done several tests with that. And even my velocities, well, I refer to the Swiss versus Swiss. With a 12-ton jack, I got better velocities from what is supposed to be the best of the best, fastest of the fastest, and cleanest of the cleanest gunpowder, Swiss. So that's why I said in the previous video, I'm not buying that stuff no more, because when you sit down and do this stuff for yourself, you can actually see what's really taking place and not just somebody writing to you or repeating what they read on a forum. In fact, go to the channel I Never Met a Gun I Didn't Love. Just this very morning of me recording this, he put up a video when he previously was shooting a Colt Walker against a Smith & Wesson or whatever, with like 25 grains or whatever, 25 grains. Somebody was leaving comments that with a certain bullet that he was using, well, with that bullet you can go up to 60 grains. So he showed the video, mockingly, of course, mockingly. He took 50 grains of 3F powder, put it in the chamber, and he tried to set that conical. He says, well, let me get this loaded, and then I'll load up the rest and we'll go shoot. By the time he took his ramrod off that conical, the conical was sticking above the face of the cylinder. Not everybody is repeating accurate information. Bear that in mind when you read stuff on forums, because I've even taken guys on this channel to a task. Could you give me a source of your information so that I can make the correction? Months later, I go back and check. They don't reply. There was one person that even said, well, I just read this off of a forum. So you're leaving comments under somebody's channel regarding a subject that you really don't know anything about through personal experience. And that's why I'm sitting down to do this. These are my personal experiences, and they may not work for you, and I acknowledge that. They may not work for you, but they work for me. That's why I'm going up to my 3 best in this, okay? So this is where I started making an adjustment in determining how clean or dirty my gunpowder is. Just simply because you make 3 or 4 shots and you put a wet patch down your barrel, it's going to come out looking dirty because you're dealing with charcoal. Okay? I found myself doing that, and it's like, wait a minute. My wet patch is showing how friggin' dirty my gunpowder is, but my patches are showing a different story. What you want, guys, is how clean is it burning, not what it's leaving behind. Because when you put a wet patch down on what's left behind, it's going to naturally come out black because it's a charcoal. But again, you determine for yourself what is acceptable for you and what you're trying to achieve, not what I'm doing. Point number 5, if that's where I'm at, I want to talk a little bit about the density of your pucks. When I first started making gunpowder and showing my process, I got a lot of comments. You need to go to a 1-inch pucking die, and I was getting comments. My God, is long as reading the Bible of all these numbers and square Newton meters and all of this stuff. You get much denser gunpowder. It's going to burn cleaner. It's going to burn faster. But in all of that, nobody thought about thermal runaway. You can take 777, put it on a block, put a match to it, and you can just about watch it burn. But you take that same 777 and put it on the thermal runaway, and it's instantaneous. But it's actually slower burning, because that's why you get more feet per second and why it appears to be more powerful. Because even in that thermal runaway, it is burning slower than a black powder. So you have to bear that in mind. So I did a video. Now by this time I've got my 12-ton jack. Okay. Once I blew the back off of my vise, I went ahead and bought a 12-ton jack, and I made that little jack stand. So I pucked it once, set it aside, pucked it once, set it aside, and then I took some of my black powder, broke it up, and then pucked it twice and set it aside, so that I had the same charcoal coming from the same batch of gunpowder milled for the same amount of time to do this test. So when I did that test, my juniper, 70 grains by volume, 5-shot average, pucked once, 1437. That's pretty slow. But that's 70 grains. You bumped it up to 80 and 85 grains by volume or weight, then you're going to get more feet per second out of it. The gunpowder that I pucked twice, same test, I got 1457. 20 feet more per second. Yeah, that's respectable. I would agree that increased it, but did it increase simply because of this? Angle of the sun? Temperatures rising between, the first shots and the second shots. So then I ran it twice. I did another test with it. And then the second time around, the gunpowder that I pucked one time, I got 1443. And then the second time around, I got 1484, which was a 21-foot difference. So there is some value in pucking it twice, but you determine for yourself if 20 extra feet's worth the extra time of doing that. For me, it's not. It's really not. So this is where my argument stands on this whole pucking it twice. If you reflect back to the video I did Swiss versus Swiss, I took 100 grams and I remilled it. And I repucked it with a 12-ton bottle jack. Now you have to keep in mind, Swiss, one would presume, knows what they're doing in making gunpowder. They have the perfect pucking conditions. I'm sure they've already figured out what is the best tonnage of hydraulic jack to use in doing this. And a lot of people will admit, yeah, they make a damn good gunpowder. So one would not expect for somebody to do what I did, take the 100 grams, remove that heavy graphite glazing, repuck it with a 12-ton jack, and shoot better. You wouldn't have expected that. But I did. Not by much. So this is what I got. 70 grains by volume, because you remember I also did a weight test to determine what the weight value of that heavy graphite glazing was. Okay, and there was about a 7-grain difference in that. So the factory Swiss, 70 grains by volume, 5-shot average came out to be 1647. The stuff that I remilled, 70 grains by weight, 5-shot average, 1669. Interesting, isn't it? They're remilling that with a 12-ton jack with a 1-inch pucking die. Yeah, it's only a 20 feet per second or so difference, or maybe even less, but here's the difference. That 5-shot average with the Swiss factory, the spread was 105. That 5-shot average of the stuff that I remilled, 70 grains by weight, had a spread of 78. So even with the spread, it did considerably different. But it just didn't stop there. I did a second test out of my Great Plains. Okay. My 3-shot average with the factory Swiss, 80 grains by volume, I got 1658. Now that was only 3 shots. Okay. The stuff that I remilled, 80 grains by weight, 3-shot average was 1715. Quite a bit of difference. Once again, that's with a 12-ton jack. So my conclusion in all of this is pucking it twice once again, is really, for me, just a waste of time. And again, using anything more than a 12-ton jack, it's not necessary. And you have to also remember that if you're going to judge your gunpowder, your homemade gunpowder against a factory gunpowder, you need to make sure that you're matching weight to weight, because what factory gunpowder has that you don't, more than likely, at least not in my case, is the benefit of the graphite glazing. So you need to match the weight to weight if you're going to compare to a factory gunpowder. So now I want to talk about blending your gunpowders a little bit, because what I have determined, blending a gunpowder for what I do is actually a little bit better. But I also want to throw into this the use of toilet paper, because over the years a lot have asked me, you should try using toilet paper, you should try using toilet paper. Well, why is toilet paper such a clean burning, fast burning gunpowder? Well, for one thing, it's a processed wood. If you go on YouTube and type in how toilet paper is made, you'll see that the industry uses junk, garbage wood. They use wood that they can't use in the building industry. A lot of times they look for trees that grow up straight, then they have this little hook and then go straight up. That's what they'll use for toilet paper and other garbage wood. But by the time they process all of that down, clean it all up, which is all done chemically, mind you, and they get it to you, and you have that little roll of toilet paper, and you put it in your charring can, and you get your charcoal. Are you not already using a blended charcoal? But you don't know what most of that wood is. I can tell you most of it's pine, but they also put a lot of other garbage wood in it, stuff that they can't use in the industry. So if you want to talk about blending your charcoals and you're using toilet paper, you're already using what is a blended charcoal, but you just don't know what's in it. That's the difference, okay? Now, you would think about blending charcoals in the context of Swiss. Swiss uses only buckthorn alder, okay? But what you're forgetting about in that, in this context, is that heavy graphite glazing is an added propellant, an added burning factor. If you don't think that graphite is all that important to this, once again, go on YouTube and type in, is graphite explosive? Or add to the context, how is graphite mined? And eventually you're going to come up with all the videos that you're going to need to understand that even though Swiss says we only use buckthorn alder, they're blending their gunpowder with an outside coating of an added explosive. So they're actually using a blend. They're blending buckthorn alder with graphite, which is a carbon source. Just Google it. It's just this simple, guys. And then you got to look at the whole context of it all. Schutzen uses not only buckthorn alder, they use maple and hazelnut. But they don't use as heavy of a graphite glazing as Swiss does. Goex combines a maple also with the graphite glazing, but you have to remember the silver leaf maple. I don't remember what the specific gravity is of that, but it's fairly light compared to your hard rock maples. Okay. So since I have gotten away using the 2-inch pucking die and going and only using a 1-inch pucking die at this point, all the numbers that I'm going to give you are based on my using the 1-inch pucking die and 80 grains by weight and through my flintlock only. Okay? So now I'm getting down to the point to what I'm looking at my numbers and deciding which ones I'm going to pick as 1, 2, and 3. Okay? And these are all 5-shot averages. Okay? When I made my gunpowder with Aspen, 5-shot average, 17-16. Cherry, when I redid it, 5-shot average, 1744. Sycamore, now this was a 9-shot average, 1740.88. Osage, 1765. Alder, which is the, which I believe is the speckled alder, 1750. Red cedar, the heartwood only, 1609. The red cedar pet bedding, 1534. And the peanut shell, 5-shot average, 1760. So my number one choice in all of that is Osage, because it got the best velocity of 1765, whereas my peanut shell got a velocity of 1760. But hold the phone. I'm going to go with peanut shell. Why? Because of the specific gravity. I can get more bang for the buck, and you're only talking 5 feet difference in the velocities. So when I make gunpowder using 7515 of Osage, I'm only using that much charcoal. Whereas when I use peanut shell at a much greater specific gravity, I'm using that much more charcoal. So I'm getting more bang for the buck with peanut shell. So let's just take a little bit of time and talk about my numbers that I got with the blended gunpowder, blending the charcoals. First, let's go with Osage alder. It was 2 parts Osage, 1 part alder. 5-shot average, 1880.6. Next was aspen juniper, 50-50. Got 1808. Aspen alder, 1853. Sycamore Osage. Now this was 2 part sycamore, 1 part Osage, 1746. And then the one that I did that was Osage, alder, and juniper, 1735. So obviously the Osage alder did a whole lot better at 1880. So that would have obviously been my number 1 pick. And my number 2 pick would be the aspen alder. So there's that. But I do have a couple more numbers I want to share that I shot these gunpowders out of my Lyman Great Plains. The shooting I did with the cherry, 80 grains by weight, I got 1586, and with the alder, I got 1597. So obviously the alder would have been my first pick, and cherry was my second pick. Now I do want to share something, just going back just a little bit, because when it comes to my flintlock and all of this, okay, on that one day, and I did all this on one day, I retested my peanut shell, 85 grains by volume. Remember, go back to that video and I kind of explained why I did that, because I was testing my sycamore and the Osage in sycamore. I kind of did all that test in one day, if I remember right. But anyhow, what I'm getting at is that I combined all the numbers that I got with the peanut shell. I combined all the numbers with the sycamore, and I combined all the numbers of the sycamore Osage blended. Okay, so I had 5 shots with the sycamore Osage, 10 shots with the sycamore, and 5 shots with the peanut shell. Out of those 20 shots, okay, the high was 1805, the low was 1700. See, I did take that high shot. The average was 1750 with a standard deviation of 27. That flintlock shoots pretty consistent for those that think it don't. And I got to ask the question. Is the velocity of 1750 enough to take down big game? Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. Now I do have other data in my book regarding these gunpowders with 70 grains. I'm not going to share those numbers, but I will just tell you that any gunpowder that I have made and blended it with the alder seems to have improved the velocities greatly. So for those of you that have been patiently waiting for what ultimately is my 1, 2, and 3rd pick for these gunpowders, thank you. So, coming in at number 3, the Aspen Juniper. Again, these are blended. Aspen Juniper 1808 is what I got for a good velocity. Number 2 would be Aspen Alder blended. Velocity of 1853. And obviously number 1 would be the Osage Alder blend at 1880. Now, hold your horses right there because that's the blended gunpowder. What about the gunpowder that I did not blend? Well, I can't give you a number 1 because Osage was 1765 and Peanut Shell was 1760. Just to reiterate, I would go with the Peanut Shell because you're getting more bang for the buck because you're using quite a bit more charcoal to achieve what is in essence the same velocity. You're only talking 5 feet difference in your velocity. That's not even worth writing home to mommy about, right? And that's not to discount the value of cherry as it burns clean. I showed you how clean the Peanut Shell gunpowder burns. Compare that to the cherry. They both burn just as clean, but I got a lot more feet per second. I got greater velocities with the Peanut Shell than I did the cherry. But ultimately, of those two, so I've really basically narrowed it down to the blended gunpowder and the non-blended gunpowder. So out of those two, which one would I pick as my number 1? My number 1 pick is this. I got to think about this for a minute. My number pick would be this. Ultimately, is what works best for you in your application. If you like what Peanut Shells did and you can readily, get peanut shells. I know a lot of people have allergy problems to peanut shells, then you might want to go with Osage. Blend it with the alder. If you can get alder. If you can't get alder, then shoot it on its own. It does pretty good. Because ultimately, it just comes down to this. Of all those gunpowders, which one is going to make you more dead? And it also comes down to this. Not all chronographs agree. Temperature, elevation, and the angle of the sun will give you different numbers than what I just gave you. Thanks for watching. Keep your powder dry. If you found this information informative enough to share with your bestest of buds, I certainly hope you would do so, and also give it a thumbs up. We'll catch you guys in the very next video. Bye.